Welcome to The Backstory, a podcast from the North Dakota News Cooperative that takes an in-depth look at the stories we're reporting for you. I'm Sabrina Halvorson, CEO of the North Dakota News Cooperative. Joining me is Michael Standaert, our lead reporter. The story we're talking about this week was headlined "Projects Demonstrate Carbon Capture That Ranchers Can Get Behind." And this was a really interesting story. And in my past work, I've reported on carbon capture a lot. And the hardest part for me in reporting on this is explaining what it actually is. And there was a sentence in your story, you did it in one sentence. And I'm going to just read this sentence. It says, "A carbon credit is a unit signifying 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide that is not getting into the atmosphere by being captured or reduced through an implemented process." So you did a really good job here just of explaining what carbon credits are, and that's kind of what this story revolves around. So I wanted to start out, as we're talking about it for our podcast today, I wanted to start out by defining what it is that we're talking about so that our listeners can be on the same page with us. But let's talk a little bit more about carbon credits and carbon capture. What are some of the things that you learned doing this article?
Carbon capture could mean a wide range of things. You could be capturing carbon at a coal-fired power plant before it gets out of the smokestack. You could be putting in building energy efficiency program. That's been a popular one around the world to reduce your carbon footprint, which is the amount of CO2 that would be needed to go into the energy used in that building. So that's been something that's been implemented a lot. But this is a little bit different. This is using a different technique than usual grazing practices on ranch land to see if they can keep more carbon in the ground than a normal grazing process would allow. So this is more about, from what the scientist Rebecca Phillips was explaining to me. I went to her site that she's working on down in Hazleton. She is putting in, I think it was about 4 separate paddocks. And what will happen is she'll have the cattle on one paddock for a while, and then she'll move them to another paddock, close that other one off, let it regrow, and then she'll keep moving them through these different paddocks. Instead of allowing them to kind of roam wherever they want. And then through that process, they have seen, she had a project that they've done in McKinsey already with this other rancher, Louis Heaton, where they did this process. They want to duplicate that to get more data to solidify everything. But it's shown that the grasses will grow back a lot better than if you just allow them to go if you allow the cattle to go where they want. You can get more native plants and native grasses and things like that to regrow in these spots. What Phillips was saying to me was that the cattle, if they're allowed to go wherever they want, they'll just naturally go to things that they like to eat. And then something might grow back halfway, and then they'll go eat it again instead of allowing it to grow back fully, which, theoretically, for what they're looking at, would keep more carbon in the soil.
So with the programs that she's putting into place, or the processes, I should say, that she's putting into place, what is she seeing from these?
Well, they don't have they couldn't really release the data on how much carbon has been captured yet. She's got to go through a peer review process with her study on this. But from what they say, they've seen it store a lot than a normal grazing practice would do. So that's, for them, that's positive. They've had people already asking about potentially buying carbon credits from Mr. Heaton's 300-acre ranch, but it's still too early for that. Plus the carbon market itself, the way things stand right, the prices aren't that high. So how do I say that? They are hoping the prices will go up so it's a better return for what they've captured.
And this is a really complicated topic to report on, to discuss, and to be involved in. And again, it's something that I've reported on for a number of years. And it doesn't seem to get any easier in explaining what carbon markets are, what carbon credits are. But essentially, let's try to define a little bit more carbon markets and how carbon credits and things can actually earn money for the people who are putting these into practice.
Yeah, there's all kinds of carbon markets that have been sprouting up all over the world, some more successful than others. I think the European Union's one has been one of the more successful at times. There's been lapses in prices at times too. What Mr. Heaton was talking about was the voluntary carbon market that they could potentially sell carbon credits to, or sell what was saved to to that market. But the prices right now are still, relatively low. I was looking at some Bloomberg New Energy Finance data from last year, looking at what the price would be in 25 years. And it ranges from, I think it was like $238 per metric ton down to around $14 per metric ton. So there's a huge variance in what it could actually be. People like the ranchers that might implement these processes and then sell credits for, they would definitely like to see it a lot higher. Some of the equipment that's needed to capture the data, because you have to have very accurate data to sell credits. Some of that equipment can be expensive and it has to be, it's like continuously monitoring the soil. So that equipment and processes can be a bit expensive, and a higher carbon price would be helpful for implementing those things.
And as they are implementing some of these processes, it can be time consuming. There can be quite a bit that goes into it, again, to document that the carbon that is actually being captured, because that does have to be documented effectively and thoroughly. And
Yeah.
so it's not necessarily a very easy process, but it seems to be to have a value to it. Is that right?
Yeah. So it would take time to to implement these practices on a ranch, and then you would need to measure that over a couple seasons to start to see how much carbon is being sequestered and captured in that soil. And then that would be measured to see how many credits that would be. And it could depend on where you're at too. It's a very complicated process. So it does take time. But one of the things they were talking about was other values that can be generated from doing these processes. Mr. Heaton said he saw an increased cattle health, which was good for his productivity. He saw more productivity as well. Things like more bees. He's got a lot of bees on his ranch too. He saw more bee productivity. So there's some kind of knock-on value from implementing these processes as well. And those values can also be turned into other things like different certifications. I mean, he mentioned one about this bird-friendly beef certification. So he saw a lot more bees and birds coming back his ranch. Things like that can also add value to the cattle and the beef that's being produced on these ranches.
Along those lines, when we talk about the carbon credits and everything that ranchers are going through to start putting some of these processes into place, what's the ultimate goal?
And the ultimate goal it depends on where you're coming from. I mean, somebody on the carbon market, they want to get these credits so that they can offset something else. So a lot of times, if a company has too much carbon footprint, it will need to buy credits to reduce that. In parts of the world, that's more enforced. In many other places, it's more voluntary. But that's how the market operates. For ranchers, it could be taking part in that market, especially as it grows. And if it does balloon to that $238 per metric ton mark, that makes it extremely valuable to them if they're doing these processes. But as I said, yeah, other things, there's these other knock-on effects that are also helpful. And there's more consumers trying to look for beef that's produced without antibiotics, more organically, grass-fed, grass-finished beef, these kind of things. So the more they can market themselves as adopting these more sustainable practices, they can add a premium price to their beef and capture those niche markets. And those niche markets are growing as well. Being part of that in the future would be beneficial for certain ranches that want to be part of that.
As you were doing this story, did you find that there was a lot of interest in this in North Dakota, or is it growing, or is there not much yet? Where's that kind of at?
No, it seems like there's growing interest among ranchers, the people I spoke with and the people they know. The North Dakota Grazing Lands Coalition has been talking about this. So there's definitely discussion. It's kind of early stages. These are the first trial scientific projects of their kind that they know that look at this. So it could take time to develop, but there's definitely an interest out there.
All right. And is there anything else that you think that our listeners should know?
Yeah, this story also came from a reader.
Yeah.
So we had a reader who saw a story that we did about regenerative farming recently. And they're like, hey, have you heard about this? This is a pretty interesting aspect similar to that's going on. Again, I encourage readers to always reach out and send ideas, and I can't see everything. So it's good to have people checking out what's going on around the state.
And they can always email in some ideas. And we do now have a news tip page on our website. So you can go to newscoopindy.org and access that as well. All right. Again, that story headline on our website is Projects Demonstrate Carbon Capture Ranchers Can Get Behind. You can read that story on our website at newscoopnd.org or in one of our local newspaper partners. For the North Dakota News Cooperative, I'm Sabrina Halvorson. This has been The Backstory.